Hello and welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Week in Review. I'm Asbed Bedrossian, and together with Hovik Manucharyan, this week we're going to talk about the following major topics: the meltdown at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Philip Reeker's visit to the region, 15 POWs return home, and the latest election poll results.
To talk about these issues, we have with us Asbed Kotchikian, who is Associate Professor of Political Science and International Relations at the American University of Armenia, and Tevan Poghosyan, who is President of the International Center for Human Development. Mr. Poghosyan was an MP in the National Assembly between 2012 and 2017 from the Heritage Party. From 1997 to 1999, he served as the Nagorno-Karabakh Public Affairs Office Director in Washington, D.C. Hello and welcome, gentlemen.
Hello, Hovik. Hello, Tevan.
Hello everyone.
Hello.
So, meltdown at the MFA. Ever since the end of the war, it seems that we've been witnessing the gradual dissolution of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in front of our eyes. As a reminder, a week after the signing of the November 9 trilateral statement, Zoran Manasakyanyan, then foreign minister, tendered his resignation. While there was no official reason given, it was claimed that Manasakyanyan's resignation was linked to him being unaware and sidelined when signing the November 9 statement. On May 20, Aved Adons, the deputy foreign minister, told Hraparak that the foreign ministry had no awareness of any document, referring to the leaked document by Mikhail Minasyan, which, to remind our listeners, is about demarcation and delimitation of the common border between Armenia and Azerbaijan. A week after that, Foreign Minister Ara Ayvazyan resigned, saying that he and the foreign ministry could have no role in ideas or initiatives that go against our statehood and national interests. A week after that, on June 7, the government also confirmed that all deputy foreign ministers have tendered their resignations. All this is happening in an environment where there is a caretaker government in place until elections. Now, 3 days ago, I should add also, there was a clarification made that the government has signed the resignation of most of the deputy foreign ministers, but has left the resignation of one of them unsigned, and that is, I believe, Armen Ghevondian. Do we have a foreign ministry? What is going on?
I've used the opportunity to answer that question also in local media, and I don't know if it would be properly to translate that kind of a joke, but sometimes we're using saying like today's foreign ministry in a condition of Lenin. He passed away but didn't bury it. I think foreign ministry as a building is there. Some structure institutional is there, but in reality as a functional institution, it's unfortunately not present in Armenian life.
Mm-hmm.
Not present because we don't have a minister who need to present Armenian positions, Armenian points of view, and so on. We don't have properly the statesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who can from time to time answer to all the questions. And second, we don't have understanding what is really going on. I think some structures are working just by inertia or momentum. Whatever they done, they doing. And majority of everything is stopped, not acting, not proceeding. And in reality, I think it's one of the worst stuff that now only one person is considering that he is a foreign minister or acting instead of foreign minister. I think it's Nikol Pashinyan, because he took the vacation for pre-election campaign, but then I don't know, for 1 hour he returned back, meet with the assistant from of U.S. State Department, and then again went to the election. Well, I don't know what they agreed, but today was the information that Mr. Reeker has been brokering return of hostages, which meaning the funny stuff that everything is now depend on that one personality and not institution. And institution is not really properly acting because deputy ministers also resigned. And even if one is there, I think it would be much more technical or notarial presence to sign some documents. And imagine the people, the one you signing your own resignation, you're asking for your resignation, but it didn't sign, which meaning that the quality of that person to do its work wouldn't be properly there. And I think maybe head of the departments, they're just simply sitting and waiting for the destiny. In reality, you can say that as a state, and it's being honest, it's not only with the foreign ministry. I think it's with all the state structures of Armenia today. We are a failed state in this moment, and the only state institution which is acting is the Office of Ombudsman. That's all. The all others are non-functioning, and Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is so important at this moment, is not properly working and dissolved.
That's what resonated with me because there was a lot of criticism of the foreign minister resigning. Some were saying that if this is really such an important document, then the foreign minister could not sign it, but also raise awareness about it and also be in his so-called ditch in order to help defend the country from his perspective. So, Asbed Kotchikian, maybe I wanted to also get your thoughts. Was this really the right move, like, this resignation en masse, or is it a way to avoid personal responsibility and personal sort of reputation loss? Or is there an actual trick in the diplomatic tool bag they're using in order to prevent the signing of something? And we don't know even what that something is in detail.
I think, Hovik, some of the things that Tevan mentioned are viable, and the explanation about the assessment of the situation is right on spot. The question is here, well, the three questions I think you ask: is it the right move or not? Right for whom? Right, we have to ask the first one. That's the first question.
For the country, of course.
Again, yeah, yes. Now, the other two questions basically end up being sort of supportive of those questions or addenda for that question. So, from the perspective of being a diplomatic toolbox, using it as a diplomatic toolbox, you can play good cop, bad cop only if you have the good and the bad cop. You can't play good cop or a no cop kind of a situation. But it is not past these people to assume that the fact that if you do not have a foreign ministry or high official in foreign ministry, then you just suspend all negotiations. So but I don't think that is the case. And in terms of responsibility, I think that's the most viable option in terms of foreign ministry officials who have most of them actually have been in the foreign ministry and foreign service for decades sometimes. They don't want to get burned in the event of Pashinyan losing. Now, I have heard, and again, it's unsubstantiated, I've also heard some rumors and some arguments that this might also be encouraged, this move might have been encouraged by the main contender, Hovik Manucharyan, to basically put Pashinyan in a more of a pickle. So all of these questions are there, but as of now, the absence of a foreign ministry is highly visible. And when I read about U.S. Assistant Secretary for European Integration, Philip Reeker, visit and meeting at the foreign ministry, my first question was like, whom did he meet at the foreign ministry? If by the top leadership has resigned and so on and so forth, not a lot of people are left there. It is a major challenge. Hopefully within a week or so, things can be reinstituted or reinstalled. Foreign ministers can go back or diplomats can go back to their work. But as of now, this is actually a major blow to Armenian foreign policy and Armenian diplomacy, if there is any left.
Dear Asbed and everyone, if you will allow just to add one very important point, which Asbed mentioned as a first question, for whom it's right. I think in Armenia, what is really we're missing and strongly missing is strategic communication. And based on this is coming like for whom he done it. If it's right for country, why you are not presenting the situation reality? If it's right for your own personality, then even speak at this time that everyone would know and not repeat some mistakes. I think on both cases, we're now in the age of keeping up statehoodness and state institutions preservation, and that strategic communication is one of the very missing point in its part. And I think we as a full right to put the strong defense, like guys, whenever you're resigning, present what is the point, because then after that it's much more clear as like trying to get rid of responsibility. And imagine if this is the general mood, which meaning that head of departments wouldn't be taking responsibility. Head of divisions wouldn't be taking responsibility, which meaning that the whole institution would not be acting anymore. Because even if the top guys are not taking responsibility, why the others need to put their career on this spot? And this is fully breaking up the whole institution.
Right.
If I got you correctly, Tevan, you're basically arguing that in the event that you're resigning, you need to also justify or give a reason why you're resigning. Is it for this reason? Is it for that reason? Because I have disagreements with serious disagreements and so on and so forth. And instead of leaving it for speculation by people like us as to why they resigned. And that itself is a statement of independence of an institution or lack of, or people thinking more about their own sort of future rather than for the future of the country or the institution.
Specifically, you are correctly got my point, and specifically, whenever your statement is saying that our institution never will go against state interest. Sorry, like if it's state interest demand that you would present the full information and not allow something to happen, while you are not speaking about what is going to happen openly, correctly. If you are not doing that, then I have a full right to speculate 1,000 variations.
Tevan, are you suggesting that instead of resigning, they would have spoken out as to what they are being requested to do that is against the interests of the state?
I would say that yes, and it's not only referring to this point. For the whole 44 days of war, there were so many institutions that should act like this. Ministry of Defense speaking after 4 months in February, Ministry of Foreign Affairs speaking after 7 months in May. Sorry, guys, what's changed? What was your hope?
Right.
If it was for your the really patriotic war, why you didn't act during the war? And this is all justified questions. It's all legitimate questions over which all these people need to present the situation. Because after that, don't talk to me like we will not go against state interest. Present me what is the state interest.
Manucharyan was replaced right after the war, right?
He resigned on November 16th, I believe.
16th. So that did happen, where the foreign minister actually did resign or was let go right after the war. So as you say,
no, let me remind you, it was case with Shushi. When Nikol Pashinyan in the parliament said that Shushi is very bad city and blah, blah, blah. It has been always in negotiation process. You can remember that Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson make a statement that Shushi never been in the topic of the negotiation.
Right.
And after that, Zorab put his resignation. And I think his resignation was ready maybe immediately on November 10, but it has been just 6 days waiting. Why you have been waiting if it's signed and ready?
Yeah, it's difficult to witness like so many, I would say, in my opinion, adults acting irresponsibly, and not I'm not even talking about institutional behavior, because to claim that they were not aware of the document being signed, from all the way from the foreign minister to the president, I'm not sure. And Tevan, I'm sorry for putting you on the spot, but the president himself said, like, he was not aware of. But a lot of people find that hard to believe. It's something that we have to come to terms with, I guess.
Honestly saying, this was one of my pushes over which I have been saying that if you have been unaware, you need to talk. And this is the point, that you need to openly say it. You are not aware. Like when Zorab Natsakanyan, after November 10, it has been 2 or 3 days after that, there was a leak in media that even Zorab Natsakanyan didn't know what was the final text. And that's why he put his resignation. After that, we're passing 3-4 days and it's only signed. The same way is going with the deputy ministers.
Right.
See, like only after a week, we're learning that week ago, deputy ministers present their resignation.
It's going to take us months of unpacking these questions, Tevan. These are very interesting questions, and it's going to take the media and everybody a lot of time to unpack what happened and when and why there were these delays.
All right, let's move on. So, as we talked, Philip T. Reeker, U.S. Acting Assistant Secretary for European and Eurasian Affairs, visited the South Caucasus. His first stop was Tbilisi, then Baku, then Yerevan. We know that from Pashinyan that Reeker played a mediating role between Yerevan and Baku for the return of the POWs. And this took place a few days ago. Asbed Kotchikian, do we know more details about the purpose of his visit outside of the POW issue? What was of importance on the table here? I'm assuming that there were different things on the table in Baku and Tbilisi versus Yerevan. And also, quickly, does the order of the capitals visited speak to the importance of to the foreign policy of the U.S., or am I reading too much into that as well?
There is not too much to read into it, except for the fact that Georgia has always been the priority for the U.S. in the region. When Reeker visited Tbilisi, actually, it came in the footsteps of April 19 agreement that was reached between the two opposition groups, which was mediated by the U.S. and the European Union to solve the political impasse that existed there. And the main message that Reeker had there, and he met with Garibashvili, the prime minister. He also met symbolically, of course, with the head of the church, the Georgian Orthodox Church, Ilya II, as well as a former prime minister, Georgi Gakharia. So why is this important? Because I think ahead of the Wednesday meeting, if I'm not mistaken, with Russia, Biden's meeting with Putin in Geneva, if I'm not mistaken, this is also a way to send a message that we're standing by you for Georgia. The main thing I was following in terms of his press release or press conference afterwards, that the United States appreciates Georgia and Georgia's sort of commitment to NATO and so on and so forth. So definitely there's a message to be sent there to remind the Georgian opposition and the government that stick to the agreement of April 19, but also that that message was also directed against Russia. Now, in terms of the messages coming out of Baku and Yerevan, they're very similar with one difference. Well, obviously, the whole discussion is about respecting the November 9, November 10 agreement, but in the case of Baku, there was also statements and meetings about the oil pipelines and the flow of energy resources from Caspian and Azerbaijan to the west. I have to mention that interestingly, in Georgia, Reeker actually announced that the first batch of vaccines that the U.S. is going to provide for developing countries is going to be actually, one of them is going to be Georgia, the other two being Kosovo and Ukraine, which itself is symbolic, showing both Ukraine and Georgia,
A
and to a
very
lesser extent
political
Kosovo.
allocation.
Exactly, anti-Russian political allocation. I think other than the energy
You know
issue,
what's funny, Asbed? Just this morning I was listening to the news and the United States was complaining that China's allocation of vaccine to other countries were going very politically to Belt and Road countries.
Yes, yeah. Well, of course, now it's become the
Right.
vaccine war, right? Especially considering that Sputnik V is actually considered to be another extension of Russia's soft power. So it's also an attempt to counterweigh that. But other than the energy issue in Azerbaijan, the other issues are similar, or the statements both in Baku and in Yerevan. The statement had been about continuing, respecting the November 9 agreement. And also, I think this is a push by the United States to make the OSCE or bring back the OSCE into the process in terms of negotiations or whatever it is that they're going to be talking about. One of the things I have been thinking about is that, this is an attempt to make the OSCE relevant without actually making it useful at all. The OSCE Minsk group process.
Right.
And unlike in Baku, one other difference that it was in Yerevan was also U.S. encouragement that Armenia continues on, specifically judicial reforms. That's something that a mantra that the U.S. has always been mentioning in the last 2.5, 3 years, or even before. So I think it's about show of force, a tour de force kind of, to show that the U.S. is active, is in the region. But I think much ado about nothing, sort of. I don't think they will have a huge impact.
Tevan, I wanted to ask you if you have anything to add, but also at the same time, we know that there is a upcoming meeting this week between Erdogan and Biden. And what was interesting to me when I was reading the sort of statements from Erdogan and different people, obviously, Erdogan said that cooperation in the Caucasus is on the agenda with those talks in Biden. Were you able to get any hints from Reeker's visit to Baku and in general the region what that meant and what Turkey's involvement is in all of this, and also any other thoughts you have on this visit by Reeker?
As Asbed already correctly mentioned in general stuff, let me look into this from the different angle. See, I always like to judge anything that is happening from Armenian interest point of view. And on this regard, I perfectly understand why Mr. Reeker is pushing American interest, what it could be there, cooperation, economy, oil, pipeline, thousands of various interests, plus presence in the region, so on. Now, let's look how it played in my hands. In my hands, whatever is should be there, I would be perfectly see if Mr. Reeker would come and finally will make a statement. US is recognizing Nagorno-Karabakh Republic or Artsakh Republic. Do we hear this statement? No. Do we hear, for example, that we are recognizing that Azerbaijan is occupying Artsakh Republic territory? No. What we have hearing that there should be demarcation of the US is ready for the demarcation or the delimitation between Armenian borders and Azerbaijani borders. What is the consequences of this? If it's just to accept that Artsakh would remain in Azerbaijan, I think it's not in my interest, and it's against of my interest, and that's why we can see like, okay, Mr. Reeker is doing perfectly his job as from pushing ahead U.S. interest, but let's be honest on the way how we preserving. We perfectly knows that, for example, Georgia is not in a position to broker up any prisoners of war exchange. They don't have any leverage and they don't have any way to push, which meaning that it has been fully U.S. deal, and what U.S. is get it. I don't know, maybe map of mines, which is very important for our security. Just simply we give it to Azerbaijan through United States. Was it serving to my security interest? I don't think so, because, for example, even Azerbaijan has been saying that, guys, just to clean up all the territory, it would take us 15 years and would cost us about 100 million. We just give that present to Aliyev for what? That he would clean it much sooner, and who would be putting this amount?
Right.
I remember that there was a very time when US has been fully supporting the mining in Artsakh Republic, but last few years they didn't provide any funding on this. I think we need to really clarify all this part and take it in a serious way. Yes, we're respecting positions of US. They have their own interest. They have their own interest in being in Caucasus. Contradicting it to my interest or no, let's play the I won't say the game, but let's play everything right in a way that it would coincide with my interest. And I don't know who was being negotiator. And this is the point, that as a consequences, I don't see now anything positive for us.
Yeah.
But plus to this, let's look to the situation, what would happen tomorrow. Erdogan would be in Shushi, signing something specific with Azerbaijan. And now if Turkey is the closest friend of US here and doing such policy, what we putting as in regard? What we would get from there? Where is the Armenian interest presentation in all this? Only 15 prisoners of war, which has been like much more now triggered in the whole media as the something to show that it's not anymore Russia monopoly, that it's just done against that Russia is transferring only 3, 4, 7 prisoners of war, and see like American deal is 15. Confrontational outcomes, which is not in here. I think on that regard, it would be very nice, not just only playing the part to saying that it's US broker deal, or it's Russia broker deal, or it's France broker deal or something, but maybe Minsk co-chairs broker deal. Where is the Minsk co-chairs joint statements? Where is the position that Karabakh issue don't have a military solution? Wasn't been it's in the agenda of the co-chairs? Is it finished?
Yeah, it
How
seems like
would be
there's a lot
getting
of
there?
push-pull inside the OSCE, MG.
Yes, and that's why, see, like the point here is that everyone has been speaking that Azerbaijan is preparing for the war. Summer of 2020, Nikol Pashinyan's or government's all moves has been how to make army less stronger or destroyed. There have been all these discussions and so on. When time came when diplomacy should be strengthened, because okay, we already lost the war. We don't have MFA. This government is breaking up institutions before the real point started. And now I don't believe that whatever scenarios is said is it right. But we don't have institution who would be taking into account all scenarios and not allowing the ones happen which are against Armenian interest, and would be pushing for the ones which are pushing Armenian interest ahead. This is the worst case with the all trips. Sometimes you can say that maybe it's better nothing would happen till the election than something would happen, because we are not able to manage outcomes. We are not managed to use the consequences. We are not managed to reach the results which would be pushing ahead the Armenian interest. This is the point, that it's not the problem of US, it's not problem of Russia, it's not problem of Turkey, it's not problem of Azerbaijan. It's our problem, and we're losing in all these games. Doesn't mean if it's someone came here with the good or bad intention. Just the outcomes is always bad for us.
Tevan, it's interesting that you mentioned about the U.S. Involvement in this prisoner exchange, and probably it's also a reason why sort of they shared the credit, quote unquote, with Georgia to give it more of a visibility regionally. And one thing I have to add, I mean, this is from November 9th, November 10th. It was obvious that Armenia is not in the driver's seat anymore, not in the case of Karabakh, not in the case of as a security guarantor of Artsakh, neither does Armenia have is in the driver's seat when it comes to its foreign policy. So this is the challenge. This is the main challenge. And I mean, to add upon, as you were talking, one of the things I was thinking of is that in the event you have someone other than Pashinyan coming into power, and in this case, most likely it would be, if someone else would be, it would be Robert Kotchikian. Probably the institution, especially the foreign ministry, would not redevelop, because in a crisis situation, Robert Kotchikian would end up taking the negotiations into in his own hand. Hence, again, concentrating the decision making in the hands of the prime minister office rather than developing institutions. Because at times of crisis, you do not build institutions; you just make do with whatever resources you have. So it is a quite sad day when it comes to looking at disintegration of state institutions in Armenia.
Honestly saying, I'm not envy to any government who would be after June 21. As you said, that it's really that would be. That's why my proposal has been always, guys, let's not go for election now. Let's go for anti-crisis management. I think we have this discussion last time, and this
Yeah.
was the right to go for the at least to manage the whole crises, and only after that go for election. But in any way, as you said, that yes, I truly believe that now he need to put someone there to rebuild the institution, but parallel to that, he need to go with the proper negotiation issues and not make any more the case when Armenia would be used as a spot for confrontation. US interest and Russian interest, for example, are not managed by Armenia. But what Armenia can do, for the sake of its own interest, could play the point where that interest could cooperate and coincide. But whenever we would make the territory of the confrontation of that interest, whatever is it has for this both countries good stuff, it would be better outcome for Armenia. This is my point. We can't go with the confrontational positions. And in reality, yes, let's be honest. Georgia not in a position. Georgia has its own internal problems so much. They just don't have the government. Who would be negotiating there? Who believe in the state that Georgians done everything? Not just Georgians has been managed by the US to just receive the guys, send the guys, maybe act as a communication channel, email forwarder or something like this. But not anymore in reality. The political weight of this exchange never be done by the Georgia. It has been done by US. And this is the point. We need to fight for all our prisoners of war returned back. But what is the price for this? Is it price which would have at the end much worse security condition for Armenia, or what?
Right. So you mentioned the prisoners of war, and I wanted to actually cover that briefly. 15 prisoners of war were returned. Unfortunately, there was some, use of the prisoners of war, both like in political speeches on both sides. But obviously, we're happy that at least 15 of our compatriots are back and safe. But at what cost, as you mentioned, right? You mentioned it as well, Tevan, that 100 million Azerbaijan may have saved up to $100 million, and probably many years in terms of demining by getting this map of the Agdam and Akna region. It's bringing them, especially right next to Stepanakert, very close to Stepanakert. Meanwhile, the November 9 agreement doesn't mention anything about mine maps, but it does mention that prisoners have to be returned or POWs have to be returned. Why aren't we getting our POWs back?
I think this is again coming to the point that Azerbaijan built up its own BATNA for all negotiations, and they now have that BATNA. And that BATNA is not 15.
Let me just clarify, that means best alternative to a negotiated solution. Is that correct?
Yes, it's much stronger hand at negotiation table on all issues, and it's been always playing a card, and that's why I've been always said that I know only two way of getting prisoners, our guys back, or we're having the same quantity of prisoners, and then we're using this all to all system, and that was we have that chance. May 12th. Penetration into Armenian territory by the armed Azeris. It was one of the best cases when we can easily capture and arrest these guys and start to talk about this trade-off. Or the second, you need to work on very strong with the international institutions, but to the level when the sanctions towards Azerbaijan would be so strong that Azerbaijan would be really judging that they need to return them back.
Pashinyan called Aliyev constructive again this week because of this.
Come on. If you will check the whole Azerbaijani media and Turkish media this last 2 days, they have been already openly supporting that both countries' interests for Azerbaijan and Turkey. Pashinyan is the best candidate, and they would do and support Pashinyan on all the cases. He just become the candidate of their heart with all those things. I think this is another message for us, over which we need to know who is our enemy. If this is our enemy and they wishing something and they consider it's their interest, how we need to act on that. And this is the fully case. Like I'm saying that you can go for the trade-offs with thousands things, but if you know that your prisoners are for 300, then that map's price should be 300.
Absolutely.
Not 15. Not 15.
At least, right? At least.
How I am making that this yuan is better than the other yuan? Why the other yuan should remain there, this one should come? Negotiate as a full package deal, because then you will show how it's going. We perfectly knows what's the exchange of the prisoners. We know this from the 91 to 94. It's the worstest trade-off between the families and between the all other thousand things. But sometimes you're paying not the equal prices, but if you need exact person, it's cost. And it's also known by the other side. And this is the point, that see, like out of this 15, 4 has been the ones who has been kind of stolen from Armenian territory. They've been captured by the Azeris who penetrated into Armenian territory and took these 6 guys. And out of these 6, 4 returned back, 2 remain there. This is the whole case. Like, what is this? How are we playing these games? How are we taking with our destinies and what we giving back? And finally, the consequences. Where is our national statehoodness understanding?
The timing of this deal is also suspect. I mean, I almost thought it was some kind of an election ploy.
Definitely. This was one of my first points after April something when he first time put this Facebook status that on June 20 they going with the election. I've been always after that saying that I would not be surprised that we would have some exchange of prisoners. And if it would happen, we need to already now discuss that this is not his positive deal because this is the part of influence. And the influence of whom? Aliyev towards Armenian election of Armenian government, which meaning that Aliyev get its partner or a high hand on managing governance powers in Armenia till the last prisoner of war. He can erect elections in Armenia next year because he can raise that stuff. Like if Armenian nation wish to get another 50 guys, go for the election, go against of this government.
Well, there are two things here. One of the things is that this is not only about getting the map for the landmines, but it's also one of the biggest issues is the corridor through Sunik. Keeping prisoners of war as a guarantee, as an exchange, is to make sure that Armenia, whoever the leader of Armenia would be, would end up also, having to exchange those prisoners for an agreement for the corridor. So it's not just about the landmines, and Azerbaijan is playing the long game by keeping those prisoners of war. And the second thing, I think the Azerbaijani approach to, even though they would not be happy to have Kotchikian elected, but the fact that they are having those infiltrations and the border incidents in a way can play as a campaign instrument in the hands of Kotchikian as the law and order president, trying to show that, like, look, your current leader or the law and order leader as current leadership is not able to protect your borders. So inadvertently, one of the things that you could see as is a schizophrenic sort of reaction on Azerbaijani side as well, as much as they want to get a lot of concessions from Pashinyan, but at the same time, by
Are you
constantly
sure that,
infringing.
for example, Azerbaijani forces would not leave on June 18 back to their so-called Azerbaijani territory, which I'm
No, I'm
calling.
not.
That's why I don't know what is the real game of this penetration. Second, Aliyev using everything to make its Batna stronger and stronger because he has a long list of stuff to do. It's not only Sunik and Zangezur corridors, but it's also Enclave, it's also another pushes, it's also the most important thing over which I think that he is asking like Armenian leadership to sign a peace deal, which meaning that no revanchism anymore or no national dream of Armenians to get back.
Most importantly, the cause for Artsakh.
Yes, and see, like from international point of view, oh, peace deal, so positive thing. Just to
Mhm.
remind you about one of American initiative, Armenian Reconciliation Project, yeah, like with Turkey. Reconciliation word by itself is one of the nicest word in the whole vocabulary. The same way as peace deal. But sometimes content of that reconciliation or content of that peace deal could mean something different. And that's why
Okay.
whenever some pushes is coming, we need to perfectly understand devil is in details. And if all these details wouldn't be properly looked forward and we would not be properly fighting for our national dream, what kind of a state we would pass to our kids, to our grandkids, and to our next generations?
I think you have a lot of good points, Tevan. And we have very little time left, but I wanted to do a quick update on the elections. Just to let our listeners know that June 11th, they released another MPG Gallup poll update. According to this update, there are 4 alliances or parties that are passing, the threshold. So the Armenia Alliance or Hayastan Dashing, they had 24.1. Civil contract had 23.8. So they're almost like neck and neck still. I Have Honor or Pativunem was around 7.4, which was a doubling of their rating, and Prosperous Armenia is at 3.7. One way that analysts do this is they take out all the people who said they would not, they would vote for someone else, or they would not vote, or they don't know who to vote for, and take those out. And when they scale the remaining numbers, you get to a better picture. And adjusted, these numbers look like 33.2 for Armenia Alliance, civil contract 32.8, I Have Honor is 10.2, and Prosperous Armenia is barely passing the threshold at 5.1.
Hovik, what about Lusavor Hayastan?
Lusavor Hayastan, even with the scaled version of the numbers, is at 4.3, so they're close but not very close. This essentially means that Armenia Alliance and I Have Honor can form a faction after the elections and avoid the second round. I wanted to get your thoughts quickly, and maybe Asbed.
Well, one of the things is that even with an alliance, you need to get a 54% of the seats in the parliament, right? So, again, depending on what the numbers are. And again, I have always reservations about public opinion polls, have always had it. But even with an alliance, they might not get the 54% threshold, which means that would trigger a second round of election between Armenia Alliance, and the civil contract. So that's one thing. I have a sort of I'm suspect about the number of the doubling of the number of supporters of Bativunem. I haven't seen their campaign actively, so I'm surprised how that number came out. And don't forget that we shouldn't pass the possibility that because of the Republican Party's involvement in the alliance, they might still have some administrative resources that they might rely on.
Well, the other explanation for that is that people were not used to seeing the Bativunem name. So previously they were mentioning Republic Party, which is Aram Zaveni Sargsyan's party.
Right.
And what's interesting is the Republic Party's numbers dropped significantly. They had initially, for when it was clear that Bativunem was going to run as an alliance, the Bativunem numbers, were very low, and Republic Party's numbers grew significantly. And the last week is, I think, when they established their marketing and name recognition, we saw the growth in Bativunem, and then also a drop in the Republic Party's ratings. So I think it may be just people's confusion with the names as well.
And that confusion is also beyond just name. I think confusion is about, what does Vanetian stand for? Remember, even with that alliance, the Republican Party is not heavily present in that alliance, the big names of the Republican Party. So the brand name is one thing, but the Republican Party's involvement and appearance in it is at a minimal level or in a very supportive role rather than a main role. But regardless, if this is an indicator of how things are going to go. I am actually worried that we have to brace for a second round election unless you end up having also a third party joining the coalition, bringing the Armenia alliance to 54% plus, rather than trigger a second round of elections.
Yeah, and it's not to be excluded, right? Because the other third party is going to be Bargavac Hayastan or Prosperous Armenia, and they were part of the Homeland Salvation movement previously.
Listen, there is nothing to be excluded in a sense that no one wants to make a coalition, go into a coalition with civil contract. So at this point, civil contract's only chance is to get 54% on its own.
Right.
So there is no possibility that any other party would join them in an alliance. Even the one that their former ally, Lusavor Hayastan, Edmond Marukian, is not going to end up supporting them.
So there is about 5 days of campaigning left, or 6 days, I forget. I think campaigning stops on June 18th or June 19th, and there is 1 day of silence or pause.
That's
Tevan,
basically this Friday.
yeah, Tevan, you've
Yes.
previously mentioned that publicly that you would prefer that people campaign about their ideas about the future, and any team that talks about the past will be automatically disqualified by you. Are you disappointed so far, or not yet?
Yes. I'm disappointed to the point that in reality, my hope was like maybe one or two groups would be talking only about past, but the others one would understand that they need to talk about the future. But unfortunately, even still like framing, even someone is trying to say that I'm thinking about the future, they're starting their sentence. We need to forget past. We need to leave the past. We need to exclude this group and that group because they are from past. The past, I don't know, something like that. Let's think about future. After 4-7 times saying past, I'm not anymore able to hear your future message, because that meaning like your thinking is there about the past. But unfortunately, this was the case with everyone, which sometimes I would say that some groups started with the future messaging, but later on was in a point to reply or fire back about the past cases, starting with the program presentations, but ending up with the person's discussions.
Asbed, very briefly, I don't think we have too much time, but you were probably have you been involved in previous elections in Armenia? What really interests me is that I believe we have a pretty good team from ECDHR or OSCE's,
Right.
the team that monitors elections. There have been some pretty intense calls for violence, whether it's like demonstratively using the hammer and telling, we're going to come after you, or we're going to go into a duel. I wanted to see why are they silent? Why are the external monitors silent? Why is no one condemning these calls for violence? And I have to say that the biggest calls for violence are coming from the civil contract side, at least based on my understanding. Do you see a case of double standards here from the international community with the elections in the past? Because I remember previous elections where there were like daily briefings by the OSCE, mentioned place
Right.
and so forth and so forth.
Hovik, don't forget that usually when it comes to observers, international observers of elections, usually there are short-term and long-term, and sometimes when there are snap elections, usually they are not positioned to bring in as many observers or follow the elections as closely. Now, in terms of having double standards, they always have double standards. It's not an issue. I remember in one election many years ago, one of the things was that there were also CIS election monitors and European OSCE monitors. And as the results came in, and OSCE was complaining about violations and whatnot, one of the campaign managers of one party mentioned that, well, yeah, the OSCE don't understand us. The CIS understands us better. That's why they didn't report any violations, because we are culturally closer to each other. I mean, you have these redundancies and also the circumstances, as I said. Again, the snap elections, unlike even the 2018 election, step election, you didn't have enough time for international monitors to be on the ground. And it's very skeletal, very, very skeletal. And one thing I have to add, when Tevan was talking about the programs and whatnot, I couldn't help but remind myself, and hopefully you as well. Jonathan Swift has a saying about, promises are like pie crusts, they're made to be broken. So most of the promises are being made by various campaigns are just that, they're promises. It doesn't have an ideological ideal foundations to be able to the path forward.
Just to add very shortly on this point, I would say that first of all, double standards has been always felt by the monitors, but this time is too. I think it's a very politicized. Seems they are all afraid that Pashinyan will use the hammer against them, or in reality something else should be done by Pashinyan also, because if it's coming from the interest side, it's the way like guys so much open violations and no reactions at all. In reality, we have not already clean election. Let me say that I would say that all open, fair, and blah blah blah. I'm not going on with this kind of a point. But with the all cases, I hope that finally the elections would be treated by the whole Armenian nation as a tool for ourselves and not for the others. And we need to learn how to really make choices. And this time choice for Armenia is to keep the statehoodness, being able to revive and get some rebirth, or we are going to become the Turkish vilayet. That's why maybe not much on the stake besides of just simply go to election and make your choice and elect the future for Armenia to be Armenian one and not those.
Okay. And with that positive note, I think we should close. Just to remind our listeners that we have two important international developments coming up this week. One is the Erdogan-Biden meeting. The other is the Putin-Biden meeting. So we will know next week at least what was disclosed publicly in these meetings and how it may affect the region. I wanted to thank our guests. Thank you, Asbed, and thank you, Tevan. And thanks for listening. We will talk to you next week.
Thank you, Hovik.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Have a
everyone.
good day.
That concludes our program for this Week in Review episode. We hope it has helped your understanding of some of the issues from the previous week. We look forward to your feedback and your suggestions for issues to cover in greater depth. Contact us on our website at groong.org or on our Facebook page ANN-Groong or in our Facebook group Groong-Armenian News Network. Special thanks to Laura Osborne for providing the music for our podcast. On behalf of everyone in this episode, we wish you a good week. Don't forget to subscribe to our channels, like our pages, and follow us on social media. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.